Let's go to Mike McAllister. Mike, let's ask you those two questions. Best point guard in Syracuse history first.
Well, if I'm going to go with that, I'm going to stick with people that I saw play. My dad would say Pearl. He was obviously alive during Pearl's run. I was a baby, so I don't really recall it much. But I would probably lean towards Johnny Flynn, although I loved Michael Carter-Williams. I don't think Michael Carter-Williams is the best, but he might be my favorite point guard in Syracuse history. Him and Jerry McNamara are probably tied, but assuming you consider Jerry a point guard. But yeah, I would probably lean towards Johnny. The thing with Syracuse that makes it challenging is they've got a lot of those combo guards like Jerry and Eric Devendorf that spent time at the one, even Brandon Trish, but also spent time at the two. So it makes it a little bit tricky when you're trying to pick those. But I think it's tough to go wrong with any of those guys. But if I'm going to pick someone that I saw play, I'm going to go with Johnny Flynn.
What about quarterback?
I'm 100% biased. Donovan McNabb is my favorite football player of all time, regardless of anything.
Well, I think it's a no-brainer in that case, right?
Yeah, I would pick him if I took him out and had to pick someone in Syracuse history. I'll just mention this guy because I think he's very much underrated and underappreciated when you're talking about the best quarterbacks in Syracuse history. But Marvin Graves was
absolutely
great.
Yeah, he was. He was born too early. Yeah, the NFL was not ready for the black quarterback wasn't a thing back then, and he was born too early, and I think he would have gotten drafted and played had he been a little bit older or younger.
Completely agree. Yeah, he was tremendously talented. I encourage any young people listening to go look up some highlights and clips of him because he was, like you said, he was born, a generation or two too early, or else he could have had a pretty good NFL career, I think.
I'm just looking at some stats here. We think of Sherman Douglas as strictly an assist guy. He averaged, over the course of his career at SU, he averaged 15 points per game.
Yeah, he was really good,
yeah.
Steve.
No, I know.
Really good.
We forget how much he scored as well.
Yeah, all right. This is going to be hard for people to understand. Sherman Douglas was my favorite player of all time in Syracuse history. I loved watching him play. And his reverse dunk, you remember that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that was, it is between the leg pass.
Yeah.
But I would take Johnny Flynn over him.
Okay. All right. I mean, again, we're splitting hairs here. But
I've only asked an SU player to take a picture with me, one player, and that was Sherman Douglas. That's the only time I've ever done that. All right, let's talk recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, let's
portal and draft.
Let's start with the George Rooks news. This seemed like maybe the biggest news to come out over the weekend as it pertains to Syracuse football. Why is this so important?
Well, they needed someone to replace Murad Watson in the defensive line rotation, and you do that by getting not only someone who is a multi-year starter at a Power 4 school, but also at the ACC, so he's familiar with the ACC landscape. He's from, he played high school ball in New Jersey, so former 4-star recruit, and then on top of that, he's a legacy. His dad was 1991 co-defensive player of the year in the Big East. It checks all of the boxes. You got an experienced starter, someone who can help some of the young guys, mentor them, etc. Bolsters the defensive tackle rotation, and I think he couldn't have asked for much better in terms of a replacement for Murad Watson.
So certainly big news there. What else is on the horizon? You look at what this team needs. It seems like they're focused on offensive linemen, right? Trying to get some more guys up front out of the portal. What can you tell us about what else they're looking for to this point in the portal?
Yeah, offensive line, to your point, they've got Zach Rice from North Carolina, TJ Ferguson from Florida State, and there's another one, Cam Pringle, I think, from South Carolina, that are all supposed to be visiting as we speak. And then there's another one, Elon transfer, Carlos Moore Jr. is supposed to be visiting this week. So that's 4 offensive tackles, not just linemen, but offensive tackles that are going to be visiting this week, which tells you they're certainly looking to add an offensive tackle to the roster and see if they can get some depth and competition there. On top of that, they had Jonte Cook, the Texas/Washington wide receiver, who was, former top 40 overall recruit. He visited recently. He also visited Arizona State and Arkansas. And then you've got Hakeem Williams, who is a former 5-star wide receiver who played at Florida State for the last couple of years. He has visited Syracuse, Colorado, and Pittsburgh, and he's looking to make a decision in the near future. So clearly adding at least one wide receiver is something that they're looking at as well. And then another name that popped into the portal recently that is just kind of someone that I'm keeping an eye on is Mohamed Toure, the linebacker from Rutgers. Now, Syracuse got a linebacker commitment from Gary Bryant out of South Dakota. So I don't think the linebacker is necessarily like a pressing need, but he's so talented and so gifted athletically that it's something that if he wanted to come to Syracuse, I think they figure it out and make room for him. But his younger brother is a safety at Penn State. They've recently expressed interest, and there's been some reports that they're working on setting up a visit. And then I saw a report today that Indiana is looking to get him on campus for a visit as well. So if Syracuse does get involved, that would be there'd be some stiff competition there for sure. But he's someone that we're keeping an eye on.
This is our first chance to talk to you since the Steve Angeli news. Handicap this for us. How do you foresee this whole quarterback situation playing itself out with Ricky Collins and Steve Angeli?
I think they're going to go into training camp with it being a battle, but the best man wins, so to speak. But at the same time, I don't think that Angeli comes here unless he feels like he at least has a decent chance to win the competition. So we'll see how it plays out. But if I had to handicap it going into the fall, I would put Angeli as my favorite to win the job. But certainly, Ricky Collins blows him away and outperforms Angeli. I don't think the coaching staff would hesitate to start Ricky either.
We haven't seen much of Ricky Collins, obviously. We've seen a little bit of Steve Angeli. Played 15, appeared in 15 games with Notre Dame, making one start in the bowl game, the Sun Bowl, a couple years ago. Based on the skill set that Steve Angeli has, do you feel like he's a good fit, maybe potentially a better fit for this program than Ricky Collins would be?
His skill set is much closer to what Kyle McCord's is. I'm not saying that he's the same player and you're going to lead the league and lead the country in passing in next year. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying from a playing style standpoint, similar to the point that Paulie was making with Allen Iverson and Judah Mintz. Not saying they're the same type of player, but just that they play a similar style. You're going to see that from Steve Angeli. He's going to sit in the pocket and dissect defenses, and he's mature. He's got much more playing experience, even though it's not a ton, than what Ricky Collins has. So, I think I don't know that fit is necessarily the word, because I do think that the coaching staff is willing to change their offensive approach based on the skill sets of the quarterback. But if you're looking for continuity and similarity to what we saw last year, I think Angeli is closer to what McCord is in terms of the style of quarterback than what Ricky Collins is. That said, Angeli is a bit more mobile than what Kyle McCord was last year, but certainly Ricky Collins is the favorite, or is the best quarterback that they have in terms of mobility.
One more football question. Just looking back at the draft, we saw 4 Syracuse guys get picked. We saw 6 others sign as undrafted free agents. Do you like anyone's spot in particular when we talk about fit? A team and player. Anything stand out to you from what you saw this weekend from a Syracuse perspective?
Yeah, if we take my Eagles fandom out of it, obviously the McAllister house was pretty pumped to see McCord go to Philly. I think Oronde Gadsden going to the Chargers is a great fit for him, because we know that Harbaugh loves to use the tight end, and I don't know who went to the Chargers Twitter account and saw them post a phone call that they had between Harbaugh and Gadsden when they were making that pick. But Harbaugh specifically said during that call, we already have a plan for you. You're going to contribute for us right away. So they looked at his skill set. They've already see a role for him. I think that speaks to the fact that he's going to make an impact as a rookie. And so I think that's a very good fit for him. I do like where LaQuinn Allen landed. He landed in a spot that, they've got Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, and those guys, but their running back room is not loaded. But he does have, I think there's 3 rookie running backs that they've got on the roster currently. So he's got a couple of other young guys that he's got competition for, but I think that's about as wide open of a running back room as you're going to find in the NFL.
And then lastly, from a basketball perspective, I would assume, Syracuse isn't done right now. They got to round out the roster and fill things out. What do you think the next move is out of the portal for SU basketball?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed for a while like it was going to be Jerry Dang, right? And then he ends up going to NC State, and then they had Jarrett Valencia on campus from Monmouth, and he picks Wichita State. So it seems like that combo forward, that guy that can play the 3 or the 4, seems like they're still looking for one of those. I think they'd like some depth with someone who can play small forward because they pretty much only have one guy there right now in Nate Kings. So, yeah, I think they'd like to have one of those, and I think if they can add another big, they can come in and compete for playing time. I think they'd like to do that as well, but I don't think they're closed to any position. It's just a matter of whether any players that are good enough, specifically a guard, would be willing to compete for a role and or what the NIL finances look like if they can afford someone who can make an impact. But certainly a combo forward and a big, I think, would be ideal if they can make that work.
What do you think is hampering Syracuse's efforts right now? Do you think it's a money issue? Do you think it's a playing time issue?
I don't know the specifics of the money situation, so I can't specifically say I think that's what it is. I think most times when you lose a transfer recruit that you're going after, I think most assume it must be a money thing and that the player went somewhere else because they were paid more. And I think probably in a lot of cases that is what ends up happening. I just don't know if that's the case here. It could also be the fact that you're looking at a guy like Valencia or Dang as, your second or third forward, and perhaps Wichita State and NC State are saying, we have a larger role for you, and that could play a factor in it as well. But ultimately, Syracuse has to find someone, and I think an underrated route to go is looking at junior college prospects. Seems like there's a bunch of junior college players that end up transferring into schools, several at lower levels, and end up making an impact. And I think those are guys you could fill in the back end of your roster with that wouldn't command a ton of money from an NIL perspective, but also would be quality depth that could help your team.
And you'd have more eligibility with those guys, potentially.
50 years.
They can play for as long as they want. Mike, great stuff as always. Appreciate you coming on.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, Mike McAllister on the show. We'll take a timeout. Quick segment next, and then we've got Tim Leonard in here to talk lacrosse. Back after this on ESPN Radio.
Lacrosse catching a break. We haven't gone off on them yet. What a way to end the season.